everyone, and welcome to another episode of Command Combat Battle Reports. Today we are doing a board game reenactment of the Battle of Stones River, also known as Murfreesboro. The Confederates called it Murfreesboro because they named it after the nearby towns, and the Union called it Stones River because they named their battles after nearby bodies of water, which leads to the question, why wasn't Gettysburg actually referred to as some creek that was nearby? But that's another story. Alright, so what was happening was you had Rosecrans on the Union side and Bragg on the Southern side, and both had been a bit hesitant. In fact, Rosecrans' predecessor, Buell, had been even more reticent. The two sides had met each other a couple months before. It had been a Union victory, but just a bare squeaker of a victory, and the Confederates had gotten reinforced, but Bragg was sort of shaken by the defeat and decided not to start again. Instead, he pulled back into this valley kind of area where his subordinates were a little confused because it wasn't a very good defensive position. But anyway, and so Buell was replaced then by Rosecrans, which some people called him Old Rosie, and he went. He took his army, started pursuing, and then he got to a point where he was within striking distance. In fact, Bragg even expected him to strike, but he hesitated then, and so the two were facing each other, and then it came down to both decided to attack each other the next day. Rosecrans planned to attack before, decided to attack after breakfast. Bragg ordered his men to attack before breakfast, and so Bragg got the first strike. And so this is the setup. You have Stones River over here, sort of on the right. We're going to start on the left. This was a dawn attack on December 31st, and the Union was surprised, even though they shouldn't have been. This was sort of known where this was going to be they knew that they were facing the army, but they, I guess, were expecting to attack. One quick note, the night before, while the two armies were in camp, they knew each other were across the way from each other, and one band started playing, actually this is the pre-battle, because one band over on the Union side started playing a Union song, somebody on the Confederate side started playing a Confederate song like Dixie or something like that. Another Union band started playing another song, another Confederate band started playing something else, and they all started battling it out musically with each other, just shouting their songs back and forth to each other, and it just became total chaos. Thousands of men playing all of these songs, Union National Anthem, and a Yankee Doodle, all these patriotic Union songs, and then like Dixie and Bonnie Blue Flag were being sung on the Confederate side. Then somebody started singing Home Sweet Home, and the other side, somebody picked up on the other side, and slowly it spread throughout them. Slowly it spread throughout the other side until everybody, all thousands of men, tens of thousands of men on both sides were singing this song. And this happened just hours before the attack on the morning of December 31st, 1862. So we'll start over here on the left, which is where the battle began. As I said earlier, the Confederates attacked at dawn before eating breakfast, and they hit the Union while they were eating breakfast, just completely catching them by surprise, which actually wasn't the first time that the Union had been caught by surprise out here, but at least the Union had the excuse this time that they thought they were going to be the attackers. Now McCook, who was in charge of the Union on this side, he had had his men the night before set campfires, a large number of extra campfires, further out to the left to make the Confederates think that they were a larger force than they really were, but it didn't really work out. Or that maybe the Confederates knew that there were going to be a lot there, but attacked anyway, and were relieved to find there weren't quite so many, and just really pushed them back hard. It was General Hardee was the commander over here, pushed his men right through, hit them while they were still having breakfast, and many of the Union cannons were abandoned without ever having been fired, and the Confederates just swept it up as they went along. Rosecrans, who was further to the back, he immediately started pulling reinforcements away from what was going to be the support for attacking over to reinforce this side, and while they were doing that, a close friend of his, who was also an orderly, had his head just lopped right off by a cannonball. The next wave came in the center, under General Polk's corps, and like the first wave, they hit the Union while they were having breakfast and completely broke them apart, sending them scattered every which way, although there was one Union commander by the name of Sheridan who had his men ready at 4 a.m. Even though they were expecting to have to go out and assault, he had his men ready just in case the other side decided to attack a little bit earlier, and sure enough, they were ready and in line when the attack came, and they were able to repulse it as they came along. One division in particular was that of General Cheatham, who came at it from the front, while another division under Claiborne came at it from the flank. Cheatham had the main chance of doing it. He had the men to do it, but he sent them in just piecemeal, one brigade at a time. Didn't really do it very effectively, and he was pretty easily repulsed. Some witnesses later said that he was drunk while it was taking place and didn't really do his job very effectively. Cheatham might have had some success if Claiborne might have had some success if Cheatham had been successful, but because he was drunk and because he didn't do his job, he wasn't able to do it. But they were attacking him from 3 different sides, and by 11 a.m. Sheridan was running out of ammunition and had to pull back. His corps commander, by the name of Thomas, who later became famous as the Rock of Chickamauga, was able to reorganize his men, and because of Sheridan's work, he was able to reorganize for the later defense. On the right, meanwhile, nothing was really happening. Breckinridge, who was in charge of the corps over there, didn't really move his men anywhere. Bragg told him to attack something, and he said, well, they're going to be coming at me. He was preparing to defend. Nothing happened. Then Bragg said, well, bring over some reinforcements so that we can continue this push against this Sheridan guy. And Breckinridge said, well, no, we have something, it's about to happen here. Finally, Bragg said, well, okay, move up and do something. So Breckinridge moved forward, expecting to run into his enemy real soon, but they weren't there. It was all empty right in front of them, and wound up just kind of having egg on his face by the end of the day. So by about 4 o'clock on December 31st of 62, this is about what it looked like. The Union had been pushed back into sort of this backward J shape, where they had a few in the back here holding against Stone River in case there was an attack there, and then curving up and going north along this railroad, which went along Stones River towards the north and would be either the Union escape route or their supply. At last, Breckinridge finally came up and did a little bit of skirmishing. He was ordered to attack, but by the time he got up there, the day was ending. Remember, this is basically the middle of winter, and so by the time that he got there about 4:30 and started skirmishing, the sun was about ready to set, so really very little happened over there. The rest of the Confederate line, meanwhile, had really pushed up, and they had kind of surrounded them like this. And from the way it looks, it really looks like this is going to be a Confederate victory because of the fact that they pushed them back and because they're surrounding them just about, and, they really look in a position of authority. But on retrospect, several biographers have pointed out that this was really Bragg's folly. Now, he believed it was a Confederate victory and said that God had granted them a Happy New Year because of the fact that it looked so good for them. But of course, what he wasn't really seeing was the fact that he had kind of outstretched himself. His men were scattered. Yes, they were all around there, but they had kind of gotten scattered and out of control, and there were a lot who, not only were they tired from the day, but also out of communication with a lot of their officers. They really were very disorganized, much the way that they had been at Shiloh, and we all know how, well, those who know the history of it know how Shiloh ended, with the Confederates thinking they had won the first day, and that being their following day because they're disorganized and beaten on the second day. And that's essentially what happened, is they got so spread out and so disorganized that they weren't ready for any more of a fight. But at first, Rosecrans didn't really realize that. Rosecrans on the Union side was thinking that this might have been a defeat on their part. The Confederates really had possibly beaten them, and it was sort of almost psychological warfare then that night and the next day, because neither side wanted to fight on New Year's Day, so they just sort of faced each other, and really became a question, would Rosecrans retreat or would he stay? It looked like he had been defeated, and so he should retreat, and he toyed with the idea, and his men talked about it. His generals said maybe we should leave. But then they thought about it, and they went, no, you know what? We are in a very consolidated, tough state. We're well supported. We can hold ourselves. They, meanwhile, are very spread out. Over the next day, actually, Breckinridge pulled his men back. And they didn't really know exactly how strong they were, but they figured, Rosecrans was like, let's take this chance. Let's hold our position. And so throughout the first, they chose not to retreat. Bragg waited, hoped that he would retreat, and when he didn't by the second, he came in again. So on January 2nd of 1863, Bragg absolutely insisted that Breckinridge move his men across that creek, which Breckinridge did. And his plan was to push up to the Union rear. They were weakest back there. Once they took them off that hill, they would have a rear shot at just the whole Union line. And if they didn't retreat, the Confederates could come at them with all of their men while having some in the rear. So it was a perfect time to strike, perfect place to strike. So they started across that creek, and of course the shallow part of the river, really. And it was waist deep. It was actually kind of deep, but they were getting across, and it was a couple of their divisions to the one Union division. Good place to strike them, so they thought. Even though they were slow, they certainly were going to be able to get up there and get them. But all of a sudden, big booming came from the woods off to the side, and what was it but some Union artillery? I'm going to get it out of there so doesn't look like he's firing at his own guy. It was essentially in ambush. Typically, back then, in the type of fighting that they had at this time, the men and the artillery and everything stood right out there in the open. You could see wherever it was. You had flags waving and everything, so you could see where it was. But this was one time when an ambush was used, and sort of a precursor to later wars like World War II, where you put artillery or something like that in ambush, waiting for the enemy to come across, and they waited for the perfect time when they're right in the middle of the creek, when it would take long for them to either go forward or backward, and just let them have it. Just pounded them with everything that they had. Just completely tore apart a couple of divisions. Breckinridge's corps was just sort of done for and had to retreat. And you would think that would only be one part of it, but when Bragg then later looked at it, he realized just how disorganized his army was, how tight the Union line was, and how consolidated it was, and how difficult it was going to be to dislodge them without being able to go into that rear, and that rear was so well protected that he finally had to pull out. And it wound up, interestingly, being a Union victory despite the earlier losses and how much it looked like they were going to lose. So that's it for the Battle of Stones River, also known as Murfreesboro. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to follow us on by subscribing here, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter, all that good jazz, and watch our mini videos. Happy gaming, everybody!